This is a safety pin, and this is a post-it note. You see, all my life, I've been looking at the world through a pinhole. This is what I've been looking at the entire world through. And even though I'd managed teams, hired people, worked with different people, raised capital, done all of that stuff when I was very young, I'd also seen data work at scale. I'd seen behaviors of different people work differently at scale, and I always seem to think that people are individuals, that we all behave in different patterns, and you can't really categorize human beings. But when I started JobSpire and when I scaled it to do 3.5, 4 million requests in 2016, I realized I started seeing some patterns, right? And I just passed it off as coincidence. And I continue to live my life that way, trying to forever change the size of this hole, trying to see the world through a bigger and bigger lens. And that's why I went to different labs. I went and studied neuroscience. I started more companies. I invested in some companies, but I never really understood people. And that was the core reason why I was doing all of this. Very recently, I found something, and it might seem uncanny or it might just seem weird, but I found something that opened the floodgates in my brain. I finally got a beat or an understanding or a pulse of how my audience or how us as Indians are. And the main reason for this, and let me show you what the reason for this is, it's my Instagram DMs, right? In this list of near unlimited DMs and comments and people responding and their behaviors on my posts, just taught me a lot about human beings. I just understood that you can actually categorize human beings, and some things work and some things don't work. So in this video, I want to show you how I went from having almost no engagement on Instagram to doing 1.3 million impressions a week by myself. And hopefully it's going to get bigger and bigger over time. But in this video, and I'm going to title this, it's called How to Win on Instagram. So let's get started. Cool. So here's a snapshot from last week of my Instagram performance. I reached about 439,000 people, and I did about 1.3 million impressions. And this is just for the week of October 11th to October 17th. As you can see, a lot of profile visits, a decent amount of website clicks. And this is great because for a lot of businesses, this can actually convert into sales. Although right now I'm not selling anything on Instagram. So let's get started. This is an average post, right? And I picked this post up and I want to show you a little bit about it because it's an average post. This is my average engagement on Instagram. And I want to show you some interesting things. So typically I post stuff that I like on Instagram. I used to do that. Now, things have changed. I'll tell you why. As you can see, 4,600 likes, 114 comments, 312 shares. That's pretty good. That's pretty reasonable. And about 1,000 people saving it to collections, which is decent, means that's valuable. But here's the interesting bit, right? I got 11 follows from this post. And this is a standard post. I got 11 follows from this post, but only 1% of accounts weren't following me. So this is mostly my audience that saw all of this and wasn't any sort of new audience. So out of that 1%, some of new audiences, some percentage decided to follow me, and the number came up to 11, right? So the reach, as you can see, is about 35,000 and the impressions were about 60,000. Not much from profile, not much from explore. This is all my audience that saw my content. It wasn't a new audience. Now that I've shown you this, I want to show you this post that I put up that I liked, right? I liked a lot. This was a sci-fi podcast that I put up. It's free. I put it up and I hope that a lot of people would consume this content, but I was wrong, right? Because the truth is I like sci-fi, but most people in the world don't really like sci-fi, right? And sci-fi stands for science fiction. And as you can see, only 698 likes, 2 follows, not very high reach, just about 14,000 reach. And I post both this as well as that at about the same time, this and as well as the last post. So it wasn't a timing issue. And impressions were weak at 23,000. But one interesting fact that you have to note is that 7% of accounts weren't following me. So while only a small percentage of people were interested in this, people outside of my audience were interested in this. So maybe it's a case that, there's an audience outside that really likes this, but that isn't my current audience right now. Then I said, let's maybe audience doesn't like sci-fi. Let me put out something just crass. Let me just put out something funny. Let me put out some funny video. And this is a video of this person throwing slippers at a target, and I put the caption saying, "Ever wondered how Indian mothers train at the art of throwing slippers?" I found this somewhere on Reddit, and as you can see, 38,000 accounts were reached, right? 7 follows, which isn't a great number, but the impressions were 57,599, which is huge, which is pretty big for my account. But as you can see, 27,943 views. So it means that while the reach was really high, Instagram only considers people who spent some amount of time on the content as a viewer. So 27,000 people have viewed it out of 38,000 people who have probably scrolled past it, right? So this is just interesting. 3,000 likes wasn't my highest performing video from a like perspective, but stay with me here. Now this was it's a personal story, right? Because this was a story, there are 2 pictures in this about my marks card in the 10th grade and how I got only 78 and how teachers said I wouldn't go anywhere. And then the next slide was, how Pajama Profit became a #1 Amazon business bestseller. And this was a personal story. I didn't expect this to work that well, but look at the stats. The reach was 51,507, which is huge, right? It's even better than any sort of funny content I'd put up. The followers was 39, whereas in the previous slide we saw that the followers was 7. Here it's 39, and the impressions were 89,000. And as you can see, a lot of people came here from the Explore tab. Some people came here from my profile. A lot of people came here from other, and it's not here, but you can see that almost 1,500 people had shared this particular post. So that's the cool part, right? And that's our first learning. That should be one of our first learnings here. If you post something that is a personal story, if you've done something interesting in the real world, if you've defied what other people have said, and if you can string a story out of it, you get much better reach, you get much better shares, and you get a lot of follows. If you want to grow your account, tell personal stories. If you don't have interesting stories to tell, live an interesting life. All right. So then the reason I put this up, and this was an experiment I ran because a lot of people sent me this particular post. It's not mine. I don't even know where they found it from. And I thought it was funny. And because like 4 or 5 separate people sent it to me, I said, well, maybe my audience will like this. And this is where I started understanding that if a lot of people like something, and it could be whether it's on Facebook or Twitter or Reddit, then a lot of people will like it on other platforms too, right? Humans behave in predictable patterns. So here, Tom was the first guy losing his job because of artificial intelligence, 6,300 likes, and as you can see, decent amount of follows. And here's the interesting bit, 44% of accounts weren't following me. So almost half of people who came here came from hashtags or from profile or from other, right? A profile, of course, is from my profile. Don't count that. But as you can see, very high amount of reach, a decent amount of follows, but the impressions were very high and the likes were very high as well. So like I said, if content performs very well on one platform, then it'll perform very well on another platform. So there's a tool called BuzzSumo that allows you to see the most popular content for every keyword that you can think of. So if you can see, and I'll tell you, if you go to BuzzSumo right now, what's one of the most trending content pieces? The word Trump. Anything with the word Trump performs really well. You might wonder why media constantly talks about Trump again and again and again. You might think, he's doing something good or bad or whatever. But actually the truth is that keyword performs very well. And people in media know exactly what I'm showing you right now. They want to write stories on the keywords that perform really well. Right? They want to, if 5 people are talking about something, they're pretty sure that 500 people will talk about it. All right. This one, I just put up because I had a weird understanding with the Tom post, and I thought that maybe it's also nostalgia. Maybe the reason it had so much share value is because people saw it when they were younger. So I started realizing that nostalgia works really well if you want likes. So as you can see, I put this post up about Road Rash, which is a game if you guys haven't heard of Road Rash. 5,400 likes, very small amount of shares, right? Whereas in the Tom and Jerry post, thousands of shares, here was just 72. And as you can see, just 2 followers. Just 2 followers. So nostalgia doesn't work really well for followers, not in all cases, but that's also because the share value is low, and the share value is low because in this post, I asked people to comment. instead of me saying share this or not putting out any call to action, I actually told them, hey guys, why was road rash popular? I actually asked a question, and as you can see, there are 408 comments, which is pretty high for me. And as you can see, reach is okay, impressions are not as high as the other ones. But what this has to tell you is nostalgia works, but it doesn't work really well for follows, right? It works really well to have them engage with that content, either like or comment on it. Right, so this was a post that, again, it was an experiment. I didn't expect my audience to understand this, and I already knew this, but I was posting it. This was about sort of corruption at Harvard, where, you know, uh, about 43% of people that are taken into Harvard right now are on the dean's interest list, or they're athletes. So it's like management quota, right? They haven't worked hard for their seats. I mean, they might have worked hard from a athletic perspective, but it's not smart people who are getting in because of their brilliance. And as you can see, terrible likes is just 1,000 likes, very small number of comments, 27. Share rate is okay, but as you can see, it's not a very high number, it's just 120. As you can see, the reach is horrible, the number of followers were horrible, the impressions were horrible. And that goes to show you that a lot of content that works online is simple content. And I don't know whether this didn't work because it was complex or because there was too much text. Because as an advertiser, I also know that Facebook penalizes content that has a lot of text, right? So I don't know which one of the two, either it's too much text or it's just too hard for people to understand. Which is why I feel like today the internet has started becoming a medium for just crass, easy to understand, simple content. So no one's learning on the internet. Because if you want to learn anything, you need to go in depth. You need to spend a lot of time on it. You need to read long papers. People are just not interested in doing that. And you can see from my stats here that this is not something, I mean, the engagement on Tom and Jerry would be great. And that could just be my audience. But the way I run my ads and the way I've got my audience and the understanding I have of my audience is they're very diverse, right? And they're from many different income ranges. They're from metros in different parts of the city. In India, it's I have a pretty diverse audience, and you can just see that nobody's interested in long form content. This is a post that somebody else told me to do. In fact, a very famous influencer that you guys may or may not know. He said, put out a very well shot photo of you guys, of you. Instagram is a platform for visual content, and people want to see other people's faces. So I said, okay, I'll put that out. But as you can see, I got the highest number of likes I've ever got. That's 8,000, and 114 comments, a lot of comments. But share value is really low because there's nothing interesting to share here. And the reach, if you think about it, is not very high. 41,000 is nowhere close to my highest reach. And the impressions are not high either. 66,000 is nowhere close to my highest reach. So if you see a lot of these influencers who put up pictures of themselves, well shot, well edited, it's really great for the likes. And that might be good for advertisers who just look at likes as a metric. But on the back end, that's not really, a good metric. It's not great if you want to increase the size of your account. It's not great if you want great reach. It's not great if you want high impressions. And this doesn't have to do with the time I posted this, right? Because I post at roughly the same time on an almost everyday basis. And as you can see, not too many follows either. This one is interesting because this was a video I put up. And this one I said, let's do a little bit of personal and let's also tell a story. So I did a story with kind of video. And as you can see, the impressions were very low. The reach and impressions were low. It's about 20,000 and just 30,000 impressions. So it didn't fly, it didn't go wide. But 27% of accounts weren't following me. So it was reaching new people. But here's the cool thing, 32 follows, right? If you started noticing now, that post where I had the marks card where I told a story of myself, and this one, the number of follows is extremely high. So you're probably starting to understand now, if you want to grow your channel, you need to start telling personal stories, emotional stories about yourself and the journey that you've been through. And you might have to repeat that many times because a lot of your audience they're new, right? They've lost context after 3 or 4 posts. So you need to keep telling your story again and again and again, even if it bothers some people. This was a video I put out, and I just few slides left. In this video, I spoke about why you should travel in your 50s instead of in your 20s. And as you can see, just 9% of the video was watched, right? And this is my usual, it's 9 to 15%. And it's for IGTV, and I put this up on Instagram TV. It doesn't mean that this is a bad statistic. In fact, from what I've spoken to other content creators, if you're an educational content creator, this is, or somebody who doesn't do just pure entertainment, this is a good metric, right? And as you can see, 18,900 views, which is pretty decent, right? And I got a lot of comments and shares on this. But I want to tell you something, and I want to show you this one last interesting slide. I put up this post about Shashi Tharoor, who's a politician in India, talking about education or something, and then I realized that the number of views was 60,700. Low number of comments, just 100, but the number of shares was 1,687, the biggest I've ever had. And this, I put up this post 3 or 4 months ago when I just started doing these experiments. And as you can see, having a celebrity or a politician and talking about things like education, which make it relatable. A lot of my audience is frustrated with the education system. Actually, most people in India are. Because it's relatable, they tend to share it and they tend to, spend more time watching it. And as you can see, the average percentage watched is 40%. That's huge for any channel. And that's one of the reasons why political news works. That's one of the reasons why the media companies keep talking about political news, because you don't tend to drop off. And these guys have all the stats, right? They're sitting on a big dashboard. They know what sort of content works, what sort of content doesn't work. And they're just feeding you the content that works. And which is why, if I put out something educational, you'd only watch like 5 or 6 or 9%. Whereas if I put out some crass political stuff, you'd watch like 40%, something controversial preferably. That brings me to my final slide, right? And in this slide, I'm just trying to help you guys understand what I've understood, which is what works on Instagram: politics, celebrities, political figures. That's very good to prevent drop-off rates, which is why Byju's has people like Shah Rukh Khan. Personal stories, like I showed you, that's very good if you want to increase the number of followers on your account. Videos of your personal story and emotional connect, similar to the previous one. Nostalgia is very good if you want new accounts to discover you, but they need not necessarily follow you. Well shot images, this is very good if you want to go to advertisers, if you want to be an influencer and just get a lot of likes, but on the back end the stats are not very good. And quotable quotes that you can put out that other people can share. The easier it is to share, the more chances that will share. And remember one thing, it is not about you. It's about what they can relate to. It's about what your audience can relate to. So really understand your audience. Transform that pinhole into, as much information as you can. And for me, that was DMing and getting DMs from like thousands and thousands of people every week, seeing thousands of comments. And that's the way I've evolved, right? And that is, it puts me in a dilemma. Do I put out more content like this, just stuff that works, or do I put out stuff that I really like? Because I don't typically like sharing anything other than informative content. So I'm at odds here. I'm at a dilemma here, what I should do in the future, but I'll figure it out. And I like sharing parts of my story, and hopefully this is something that you guys can use, especially the guys who are serious about creating content on Instagram and YouTube. Personal brands are becoming very, very, very important. And if you guys don't create, then somebody else will, right? So here's what works. Subscribe to me on YouTube. Don't forget. Follow me on Instagram, and hopefully I'll be putting out more what happens on my experiments. Thank you, and bye-bye.